Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 158.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on professional club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. It's Monday morning, and early this morning I called Diamond Golf International in the UK to place an order for a new Wishon EQ1NX single-length hybrid head, 4-hybrid actually, and for 2 new single-length fairway wood heads, a 4-wood and a 7-wood for me. One of my favorite clubs in my bag is my 41-inch 7-wood, and I'm looking forward to building and playing these 2 new fairway woods at that length. Normally, my 3-wood that I've been playing is at almost 43 inches, but now my 4-wood will be 41 inches, just like my 7-wood. And I'll be using the shaft I presently play with and the total club MOI that's been best for me. So this is a little experiment, but I think it's an experiment that's really going to work and improve my fairway wood play. This kind of option is available now that the new Wishon EQ1NX single-length irons, hybrids, and fairway woods are available. Today, you get to listen to Tom Wishon talk about how these new designs happened and the value they have for golfers who want more consistency in their games. And guess what? To shoot lower scores. Enjoy.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 158 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. And welcome back. I call you kind of retired Tom Wishon. Yeah, right. From Wishon Golf. And today we're going to have a discussion, and I hope it's going to be a really interesting one, about his new EQ1-NX single-length designs. And most when you've heard about single length, you think just irons, but Tom actually took the plunge into hybrids and fairway woods, and I'm really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about some of his thought processes for what he did there in those designs. So Tom, welcome back, and it is really interesting. I look back; it was March 16th. We published the last interview, which was right before everything just went crazy, at least for me here, about the pandemic. So. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Well, thanks. It's nice to talk about golf instead of something other than golf.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the interest, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, as a start, when we talked in mid-March, we talked about your new book, Captain Clubmaker, and maybe just a little bit about the kinds of feedback you're getting. How's book sales? What surprised you so far about how all that's gone?
Done very well so far. We've been a little bit lazy, and again, the change of this year with the pandemic has really changed a lot of things about how at least the golf business is run, and all that sort of thing. So far, we've just done the Captain Clubmaker book to the club makers. We haven't really made any big pushes to try and publicize it for just regular golfers. Really, I kind of thought at first that, because the book was part one, which is, a whole bunch of stories about all these fun, crazy, interesting, sometimes funny experiences that I've had over a whole career of trying to learn everything there is about a golf club and designing golf clubs and all that sort of thing. And then part 2 is all about kind of try to put a composite together of all the really important things that I think I learned about golf clubs as a result of the years that I was doing research and doing design work and all of that kind of stuff. So it's different. It's 2 completely different halves to a book. And I kind of had the thought, okay, maybe there's a whole lot of people who didn't know me all that well, and all that, and they wouldn't be interested in some of the stories that happened to me in my career and all that. But, I've had a lot of really good positive comments, and a lot of people, really laughed hard at some of the crazy things that happened, over a course of so many years of just, being in love with messing around with golf clubs, with that. So, yeah, it's been received very well. I've been very pleased with that.
It'll be neat when it kind of gets out into the wider audience too. I'm sure it's going to take off for a lot of people. So that's great. Well,
I think anybody who's interested in golf clubs, if you really have an interest in your equipment, there's some good stories in there, and you're going to, you learn a lot. And I wrote it in such a way that you don't have to read it from page 1 all the way through to the end. You can just look at the table of contents. If any of the chapter titles are of interest to you, just jump to that. None of the chapters are any longer than 3-4 pages. So it's just more of a fun book to pick up and read a few things, set it down, come back to it whenever, and just go about it that way.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, let's dive into talking about the new line of Wishon single-length irons, hybrids, and fairway woods. And maybe let's start a little bit. What started you thinking about changing the design of the single-length irons? The previous design was called Sterling. We did a couple of interviews. And how difficult was it to come? Well, no, I'm sorry. Let's just talk about that. And what types of performance improvements kind of really drove you to the new designs?
Sure. I think first of all, I got to say, in well over 400 different models of drivers, woods, hybrids, irons, putters, wedges, you name it, in all of those models that I've created in my many years of doing design work, I don't think there's been one that after it's been out a while that I looked at it and said, I should have maybe done this or that, or something like that. It's kind of like, You're never fully 1,000% pleased. You're happy with it and the whole thing, but you always leave the door open that there could have been something else, And that was always the case with Sterling, too. There were certain elements in there, and then as we got feedback, and the Sterling single-length irons really did well. They were, a lot of people who are not that familiar with single-length. Single-length is not totally new, I remember a guy from Canada named Eric Cook pushing single-length irons back in the 1980s, long before, they started to gain any interest here. But they all had something in common, and that was the fact that they were always made to a 6-iron length, 37.5 inches. And I was never really that enamored with them in the past, because my thought was, that's too long for the wedges. It'll be too hard for the wedges, for players to control, distance control with the wedges, with that. And so I just kind of left it out there. And then, it was thanks to an interesting guy by the name of Jacob Bowden paid me a visit one day back, several years ago, back in 2013 or so. And he was really very much into single length and the whole thing. We started talking about it. And he made the comment to me, he says, is there any way that single length could be made? Like you say, you don't like the longer, 37.5 inch long wedges. Could you make single length shorter? And all of a sudden the light bulb started to go off.
You had never thought about that before? Oh, how about that?
I had not. Yeah. I had not thought about that before. Mainly because when you go shorter in length, your club head speed drops, okay?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about low lofted clubs in a set, such as, let's say, a 3-iron, 4-iron, even 5-iron, you need club head speed to get the ball up in the air, to stay in the air, to fly and carry and achieve full carry distance, with that. And so but then I had thought, over the last several years, I've been doing an awful lot of work with high COR face irons. And, I was at the point where I could design irons that had an 830 COR, as high as the COR as what people think is, in a driver. With that, I could do that in irons. I thought, well, I could marry those two. I could put a high COR face into the low loft irons, make them shorter, and they might carry far enough for, most golfers with that. So that was where I started to work on that, and did not jump right into it with both feet. I kind of was dabbling on it and all that, but had the design pretty well set up and completed at the end of 2014 going into the beginning of 2015. Okay, and then all of a sudden, boom, summer of 2015, what happens? But a guy by the name of Bryson DeChambeau comes along, wins the U.S. Amateur and wins the NCAA championships in 1 year playing with single-length clubs. And all of a sudden, the media in golf is all over it, and they're writing a lot about it. And so, as I finished the Sterling irons in 2015, we prepared them for an early 2016 release. They took off and did very, very well. As they were out there, and we were getting a lot of feedback and all that. Sure, we put them through testing for a lot because this was a club that went through almost 3 years of development with that. And a couple things, with that one was I did the high COR irons in the number 4, 5, 6, and 7. And they were the type of high COR iron where the back of the face, the back of the thin face, was exposed in the cavity of the iron. They were not a hollow body iron, like you're seeing a little bit more of today. And so they had a little bit different impact sound for the high COR irons than did the 8 through wedges, which were conventional one-piece investment cast carbon steel. And so some golfers, most golfers didn't even notice it, but some said, the 4, 5, 6, 7 irons sound different when I hit them than the other ones. And that was one I kind of thought in my head, okay, yeah, I understand that. And then I had designed one hybrid only with the Sterling irons, and that was a number 5 at 23 degrees. It was the alternative if the player didn't quite have the club head speed to elevate the shot properly with the 23-degree loft Sterling 5 iron with that. And the hybrid was done with the same iron shaft as the rest of the irons would be done with. And it was better than the 5 iron, but it wasn't quite what I wanted in terms of ease of getting the ball up to fly.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose. If you're going to have a hybrid replace an iron, you want it to get the ball up better than the iron, and that's why you're using it, for that. And so that always kind of stuck in the back of my head that the one number 5 hybrid wasn't good enough. And then I had thought, it'd be nice if I had a number 4 hybrid also, but if the 5 didn't perform exactly like I wanted, why do a 4? That's even harder to get airborne, for something like that. So, that kind of stuck in the back of my head. And then, over the course of the Sterlings being out, there were people, who actually brought up the point, have you ever thought about doing the woods or a driver? I said, well, you can't do a driver, short, because the worst thing in the world to do is to sell a driver that people hit straight and 30 yards shorter than what they had before.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to buy that, with that, because the driver is such a club that has such an accent on distance, even at the cost of accuracy with a lot of people, for that. So fairway woods only, I thought, maybe, maybe, and it was just back there in the back of my mind. So, the Sterlings were out for they came out in early 2016, and they were doing well and the whole thing like that. And this whole thing with the changes that I, was thinking about, was sort of gnawing at me. And so I kind of thought, I'm going to go to work on this, as a second generation, even though these things are still really popular. And my company has always kept models in the line for a lot longer period of time than any other golf company has. I thought maybe we'll just kind of break ranks there and we'll do a jump switch on these things, at some point before they, drop in popularity. for that. And so I'll go into work on that. There's where some of the changes came about. I knew I still wanted to have the single length based on an 8-iron length of 36.5 inches, because that definitely makes the wedges better than if they are 37.5 inches. So that was a done deal. That was going to stay the same, in the new EQ1 model. It was a thing also where I looked at this and I said, what about that sound difference between the high COR face low loft irons and the normal thicker face low COR conventional irons? And so that was where I said, okay, let's do a hollow iron with that. That way we enclose the thin face within the body, and impact, sound can be the same from all of them. So the other thing that happened then is say, if we do a hollow iron, that means we have the chance to improve the moment of inertia, the MOI of the club, because we'll be able to have a higher percentage of every head's weight all around the perimeter, and none of it is in the inside of the head because that's all hollow.
Yeah.
For that. And so that became a side effect, to say, okay, yeah, we can not only, make the impact sound exactly the same and more normal through all the heads in the set, but we can also increase the moment of inertia to help off-center hit capability a little bit more than what we had done before. Other thing was I had grown to come that I thought, I could have done a better sole design on the Sterling irons and had not, and so I made a more radius sole from face to back, a more rounded sole. So the sole on the EQ1 was, in my opinion, a little bit more universal, meaning that it was playable from bent grass, playable from Bermuda grass, and it was a little bit tiny better of clearing the club through tall grass, as well. So that sole design, I did that on all of the irons. Then started thinking about the wedges. With the Sterling irons, I had designed the sand wedge so that it looked like traditional pear-shaped face profile sand wedges, like which are popular. But I had done the gap wedge with similar profile to the pitching wedge 9-iron and 8-iron. With that. So I said, maybe I'll do the gap wedge and the sand wedge like they are standalone wedges, with more of a traditional face profile. And since those are the spin clubs, I think I'll mill the faces on those as well, which I had not done on the Sterlings. So that was another big change, to take the gap wedge and the sand wedge and to turn them into, to mill the face and make both of them more of a traditional wedge shape. With that, and then I incorporated an offshoot of a custom grind I had done on a line of wedges for the Wishon Golf product line that had been called HM series wedges, and I modified that custom grind that I had done on the HM wedges and did a different custom grind for the EQ1 single length wedges. So that became yet another change, for that. So there was quite a few things going on, that would change. Enclosing the body in a hollow iron construction to make impact sound all identical, getting more moment of inertia for better off-center hits from a hollow iron construction, a sole grind that had a little bit more face-to-back radius to be better playability from all turf, and then milling the face on the wedges and making more traditional gap wedge and sand wedge look, for that. So was happy with that, and I definitely did not intend to do a 4-iron. When I did the 4-iron in the Sterling, I still believe that an awful lot of the people who bought that should never have bought that 4-iron because, we had done this in testing and found out that the 20-degree loft of the 4-iron at an 8-iron length required a clubhead speed of 85 miles an hour or higher with the 8-iron length to be able to elevate that shot high enough to get good distance from the 4-iron. That's not a lot of golfers when you're talking about 85 mile an hour with a 36.5-inch length, for that. So there was never going to be a 4-iron in the EQ1 set because I also had said I'm going to work on the hybrids. And the hybrids are definitely going to be designed, so that they will be a part of the single-length iron set capable of being built to 36.5 inches so they can match in with that. But then I had the thought, let's hedge the bet here because, not everybody is going to want to think about hybrids as a part of a single-length iron set. There's people who just want hybrids at conventional hybrid length. So that was when I started to go to work and said, how am I going to do this so that I can do the hybrids and also the fairway woods so that they are not totally locked in only to be built to a single length with that. And that was where I started to go to work on more weight addition capability inside the heads. My head designs have always had internal weight addition capability because Wishon Golf designs are only custom built to be custom fit. There is no such thing as a standard off-the-rack built to one series of specs, set of Wishon design clubs. So because you as a custom club maker have to have the ability to change the weight of the head, you need to do that because you're going to have different lengths, different shaft weights, different grip weights, different swing weights that your customers want their clubs built to. And you have to have the ability to be able to change the weight of the head. So I've always done that, but this time we kind of went, on steroids, and I created 4 different separate weight addition chambers in each hybrid and fairway wood head in the EQ1 line. So you had the capability of being able to, if you needed to, you could add as much as 30 grams of weight to each head. Nobody had created that kind of weight change capability in a club head before. And so, I set these up so that the spec head weight was closer to what was necessary for normal, longer, conventional hybrid lengths. You added more weight when you wanted to build them shorter to match the 36.5 inch or 37 inch, whichever you fit to, of the single length irons. And not only that, I decided to do a 4, 5, and 6, because no matter what, today, Tony, the companies over the last several years have begun to lower lofts on irons yet again. If we go back to when I started in golf, or you started in golf, a standard loft on a 5-iron, you remember, was 32 degrees. Okay,
yeah, right.
Today, that's getting to be kind of the standard loft of a 7-iron, out there. And in that world of shrinking loft irons, when one company does it, everybody has to follow, because loft in an iron is the major determinant of how far you hit the club. And yet most golfers have no idea what the loft angles are of each iron in their set. So if they go out, they walk in a shop, they pick up a new model of an iron, they pick up a 7-iron, they go out and they hit it a club longer than they hit their current 7-iron, they fall in love with it more times than not, and they want it because distance sells more golf clubs than any other factor ever in the history of the game. With that, people put such a premium on distance, even with the irons. Who doesn't want to hit an 8-iron into a green where they used to hit a 7-iron? You always feel like you have more confidence in doing that.
Yeah.
So you're stuck with the low lofts, and therefore, if we were looking at having to have a 7-iron that was going to be 31 or 32 degrees, this also brings in the situation that when you talk about a lot of normal golfers, most golfers don't have a club head speed that's high enough to really elevate the ball properly with an iron loft under 30 degrees, to be able to get full distance. And, if any of your listeners, if you have irons out there where you bought a full set of irons and you just can't hit the 3-iron and 4-iron and 5-iron, high enough to get them to carry, a full club apart from each other, it's because your club head speed is not high enough to elevate the shot with the low lofts that companies are making these irons to have these days. And so the answer to that was, I wanted to go to work and say, okay, yeah, there's going to be some regular golfers who just don't have the speed to hit the EQ1 5-iron or 6-iron even, but they're fine with the 7 through sand wedge. So what are we going to do for those, replacement of the 6 and 7-iron that they don't have the speed to hit, or 5 and 6-iron? It's a hybrids, and the beautiful thing about it was that in adding more weight to the head to make it the right swing weight at the 36.5-inch single length, one of the weight chambers is on the very back middle of the sole, where you can add, 12 of the 30 grams can go in there. and that moves the center of gravity back. And when you move the center of gravity back, you help increase launch angle and shot height. Okay. Not only that, but a hybrid has a much, much wider sole than does an iron of the same loft. And that puts more weight low on the head, which lowers the center of gravity. So these EQ1 hybrids had two things going for them to help golfers elevate the shot to get full carry distance: a more rear-located CG and a lower CG, working, hand in hand for that. And that we saw in the hit testing was amazing. When we built those and loaded the back weight bores to move that center of gravity back, that plus, the more mass on the sole to begin with, really made a difference to where, if you had a golfer who was right on the cusp and couldn't hit the 5-iron high enough to get full carry distance, you give him the 5 hybrid with the same loft, at the same length, and boom, he's getting it up in the air, and he can now carry it a full club longer than the 6-iron, in the set. So, but at the same token, if you have, guys who don't care about single length and they're interested in new hybrids, you can build them, you can build these EQ1 hybrids to be normal, say 38.5, 39 inches on the number 4 hybrid, that type of thing as well with that. So they were very versatile, with that. Lastly, the woods were a challenge, largely because when you get into fairway woods, distance is still important. And the choice there was, what's the single length going to be? Now, a normal 3-wood these days is 43.5 inches. Okay, normal 7-wood usually drops down to 41.5 inches, sometimes 42.
For me, I think it's like 40-ish, but I can't, I have to go back and look at my data. But yeah, right. 41,
yeah, I'm looking at what you buy off the rack.
Yeah, right.
For example.
Right.
Because normally, you'd say 43 inches on the 3-wood, 42 inches on the 5-wood, 41 inches on the 7-wood. Type of thing.
That's right. Yeah.
So the problem there was, if we make a 3-wood 40 or 41 inches long, there's going to be some golfers who will not generate enough clubhead speed to hit that 3-wood as far as they would if that 3-wood were normal length at 43 inches. Okay, now the other side of the coin, of course, is the whole reason why single-length fairway woods could be, a decent thing for golfers, and that is accuracy, control, and consistency. Hitting today's, fairway woods off the deck to make them fly high takes some skill. Also takes some clubhead speed, to be able to do that. And when you're swinging a 43-inch 3-wood with 15 degrees aloft, you can still slice or hook it out of play, off of that. So, we did a lot of work on trying to figure this out, and so I came upon the custom options of being able to build the EQ1 fairway woods at single length to 40 and a half, or 41 inches. And we designed the heads of 3, 4, 5, and 7. And I designed them at 2 degrees apart because I did not want any golfer to have all 4 of those woods. If you only have 2 degrees of loft separating all your fairway woods, that is not enough loft difference to give you, a proper distance difference between each wood. So I set the single-length woods up to be an either-or. Either you fit the golfer with 3-wood and 5-wood, or you fit the golfer with 4-wood and 7-wood. You would not fit the golfer with 3, 4, 5, and 7. Okay, so that way if you have 3 and 5, they're 4 degrees apart. If you have 4 and 7-wood, they're 4 degrees apart with this. Now, in terms of the length, we came up with the guideline to say, okay, if the golfer has a driver clubhead speed of 95 miles an hour or higher, which is a little above average, then he can go with the 40-inch single length, because more often than not, the higher clubhead speed players are seeing, more problems with accuracy and control. And so therefore the 40-inch single length for the fairway woods would be something that he could work with for better accuracy and more consistency. on that. The 41-inch single length for the fairway woods, that might be for the player who is lower than 95 miles an hour with the driver clubhead speed. So we're giving him an extra inch to get a little bit more clubhead speed than he would at 40 inches to get a little more distance. But 41 inches for the length of all the woods is still like a 7-wood length.
Yeah.
So most people anyway, if you ask them, which fairway wood you hit the most consistently, 3-wood, 5-wood, 7-wood, most of the times you're going to hear about, 7-wood usually. And a big reason of that, as a good club fitter yourself, is because it's the shortest of all the fairway woods. Also, it has the highest loft, but the short, length really helps a lot. So that was the general starting guideline. Higher clubhead speed, you go with the 40-inch shorter length of the fairway wood. Slower clubhead speed, go with 41 inches. Better ball striker, better swing characteristics, okay, 3-wood and 5-wood, okay. Average player, with some swing errors in that, 4-wood and 7-wood, for the set makeup with that. But at the same token, if you didn't want to jump out and go with single-length fairway woods, the fairway woods are also designed with 30 grams of weight addition capabilities, so you don't add the weight to get the single length. You leave them at normal weight and just work with them at normal fairway wood lengths if you want to do that. Both the hybrids and the fairway woods in the EQ1 set, they're also designed with thin, high-strength steel faces for high COR. So you get good smash factors with those club heads, as well to maximize your club head speed into more distance possible. So overall, when I look at that, this was probably the best example I've ever been able to have in my design career, where I looked at a first model, the Sterlings, and I worked with, and watched, and reacted to all the feedback in that, and said, okay, if I get another chance to do another single length design, here's all the things that I'm going to incorporate into it that I learned from Sterling. And that's what EQ1 ended up being. And really and truly, it took longer to design and develop and tweak and finish than any other design of all the over 400 that I've done in my career.
Wow!
Because there was a lot going on in all this. And in fact, I did even, I haven't let many people know about this, but I trashed one full set of tooling dies. On the irons, threw them away and started all over again with them because I just didn't like the way certain things were going on the hollow iron construction, and I thought of different ways to do it, and said, okay, sorry, Darren, I just threw away several $1,000 with that. And he said, no, that's fine. If you don't like them, then we don't want to sell them, for that. So.
Well, like I said, you're kind of retired, so you could do that, right?
Yeah, and that's funny, Tony. I'm working harder than I did when I had the company open here. Yeah.
Well, one of the things about the irons that I do want to make sure that you mention is the new design allows the lower loft irons to launch a little higher, and actually the wedges launch a little lower because for some people the wedges, there was a tendency for some people where they will hit them maybe a little too high,
you
right?
Brought that up.
Yeah,
I didn't have all those things. I didn't remember that. But the hollow iron construction not only allowed us to increase the MOI by putting more weight around the head, but it also allowed me to move the weight up and down. So we piled up more weight low, in the heads on the low loft irons, and then we moved that weight up to raise the center of gravity into the wedges, to cut out any, as many chances of, too high of a ball flight, in that thing. Shot shape with these things is really pretty good, with that. If I do say so myself.
I think I'm finally going to pull the plug. And, the plug for me with these, I think, is probably going to be, I'm 71. My driver swing speed maybe about 85. So I'll probably start with a 7-iron and do a 6 and a 5 hybrid, and then probably a 7 and a 4 fairway wood. And I think that's going to end up being, I'm not hitting par 5s anymore. But
right?
Launching the ball a little bit higher with a 4-wood and still having a 7 wood, and that's one of my favorite clubs. Almost like you mentioned, is it's a natural fit, I think. So, what I did want to mention. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I turned 70 this year, and I'm 10 miles an hour slower with a driver's speed than I was 5-6 years ago. So I'm around 90. I'd say that, and high 70s. With the iron speed. It was interesting. I laugh about this now. I've played the single length iron since 2016 and haven't gone back. It happened totally by accident. I had a test set in my bag, at one time that I was still doing a lot of work with on the Sterling irons back in 2016. And my wife and I were going to go on vacation, and I was really busy with a whole bunch of stuff. And so she did all the packing on this particular one. And she threw the bag in the travel case. And when we got to where we were going and we were playing golf on vacation, pulled the bag out, and there were the single-length clubs. And I go, oh, shoot, I didn't put my regular clubs back in here. So there I was, playing 3 rounds of golf on vacation with single-length clubs, for this. And, I knew they were, okay, but I, like a lot of people, I was, I put it at the time, I've been, 4, 5, 6 handicap player, and a lot of lower handicap players are predisposed to not to want to think about playing single length, with that. But I did, played really well, liked them a lot, with that, and kept them in the bag, ever since then. But even with, let's say, if I'm 90 mile an hour club head speed right now, I play the 6 hybrid, and then I go 7 iron through sand wedge, with those, because I'm more consistent with the 6 hybrid in the iron set at the same length as the other ones, even though I can hit the 6 iron, okay, with that, with my speed, for that. So it's just, hopefully one of the things that happens to golfers as they get older is they get a little smarter. Do you think that's true?
Some of them. Some of them. Well, I
think you're right.
Yeah. I did mention it. I wanted to mention a story, and maybe then you could tell any, initial stories you have with people that have corresponded with you about the new ones. But so I had a guy last weekend, and I just kind of started doing a fitting with him, and he plays a 38.5-inch 5-iron, and his swing speed is, around 90 miles an hour with that. He's hitting maybe 180 yards in the air. And he is intrigued with the single-length hybrids, okay? He said, well, I think I'm probably going to want my hybrid to be the same length as my 5-iron, right? So, his smash factor with 5-iron was, 1.3, not bad, not great. Hit it in the air about 180 yards. And all of my test clubs with the hybrids, and I've got the EQ1 5 hybrid in the fitting system now, and all the shafts are 37.5 inches, an inch shorter than, his 5-iron. And he hits a shot, and the first one pretty much threw out, with some variations with different shafts. He's hitting at 180-ish yards, sometimes as much as 190 yards, with a swing speed that's 5-ish miles an hour slower than with his 5-iron. And with a smash factor that's almost like a driver smash factor, which I can't explain, okay? That's like, 146, 148. I mean, he's just hitting the thing a ton. So we're going to go back and, attempt to see what happens with longer clubs, longer 5 hybrid, but I have no idea if he's going to get any better results with that for him than this other club that just, he nuts it higher in the air, 10, 12 feet higher in the air than he was hitting his 5-iron. He hit some great shots. So,
well, you know what? I kid around with this, but it's an absolute fact, and that's the thing that it is an extremely enjoyable and fun thing to be able to design a new golf club.
Yeah,
that is something that I have always gotten a big kick out of. But in total honesty, what's even more enjoyable for me is when I get to hear stories like that. Where something that I, designed, was fit right, put in the hands of a golfer, and thrilled him.
Yeah.
You know, that's really impossible to beat right there in terms of, you know, what I get to do, you know, in my work.
Well, it's the same with me too. I mean, I think that probably sustains me more than getting somebody to give me their credit card for doing it, because I've always loved golf so much, you know. So it's amazing. So any particular stories so far from anybody that they've fed back to you related to the new designs? And, you know, and mention again, what was it, 3 or 4 months late? That was driving you crazy. with all the things. But,
you know, didn't have a lot of say in that one, you know, because the factories, you know, were over where the pandemic began, you know, and they were locked down, shut down tight. And then when they began to reopen, there are so many of the workers in the clubhead production factories over there whose family, you know, who don't come from where the factory is. You know, all these factories that make all of the consumer products for the Western world generally have dormitories, you know, that are built on site where the factory is, because they have had to go so far away to bring labor forces in. You know, and so a lot of the workers at the factories are from 200, 400, 1,000 miles away. And they live at the factory, and then during its holiday times, they go home, you know, for this. Well, it was Chinese New Year right when the pandemic was hitting. And so all these factories, the workers left. They went home. And then when the lockdown came, they couldn't come back to work, you know, so, and that was for a long time. So even when the factories reopened, you know, with skeleton crews, they couldn't put out more than about 20 to 40% of their normal production, you know, and everybody fell behind, you know, on all of that. And then it really hasn't gotten any better for them, because on the good side, you know, golf became one of the safest activities that people could do. You were already socially distanced from each other on a golf course with only 4 people on a hole, you know, in a group at one time, you know, and so with a few little guidelines, and this golf course is opened, and golf just began to boom. I get the newsletters from the National Golf Foundation, and rounds of golf nationwide for the whole year are up over 20% over last year. And this includes all those months in March, April, you know, when over half of the golf courses in this country weren't open for 2 months. Yeah. You know, with that. And, you know, and so, you know, golf is going through the biggest boom that I can remember since probably the early 80s. And before that, since the Palmer era, you know, with that. And so with that has come an increase in spending. You know, I mean, I look at most of the golf companies, you know, their March, April, and May revenues were horrible, you know, down 60, 70, sometimes even 80% from the same month last year. But they have done so well in June, July, August, and continuing in September that most golf companies now are up for their 2020 revenue compared to 2019 to date, you know, which is remarkable, you know, with that. So that's put a real strain on the factories that make the shafts and the grips and the club heads and all that to try and keep up with what was no demand that went into record demand, you know, afterwards. That's tough to forecast for.
Oh, that's right. Well, any particular, you know, other than maybe the one I just shared with you, any other particular feedback you've got from anybody about the new designs that you said, wow, I got it, you know, or at least I sort of,
you know, I think the ones that really are hitting me are the ones that I'm getting from people who have played with a Sterling single-length set for several years and love it, you know, and they went ahead and tried the EQ1 and liked it better. You know, and that's you know, that really made me feel good, because, you know, the whole reason for doing EQ1 was to second-generation single-length set that potentially could be better, you know, and so to hear, it is better, you know, with that, I think that's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, we're in the home stretch here. Do you think single length is kind of over the hump in terms of people just more and more accepting it? My view, and I wrote my blog a week or so ago about it. Somebody else is going to jump out there and Bryson's club or Sir Bryson's clubs, but somebody else is going to play single length, I think, on tour, and it's going to keep happening. But do you think that's where it's going, or maybe it doesn't matter because if golfers that are smart enough give it a shot, a lot of them find that it really works?
I think we're getting to a point now where it's starting to perpetuate itself in the sense that the few people who took the leap of faith and went with single length back in, let's say, 2016, when Bryson's first entry onto the PGA Tour created enough interest to get people to take a look at it. There's enough positive feedback from the regular golfers, average golfers, that I think it's kind of knocked down the stigma of being so different and odd. Now, I'll be the first one to admit, too, I'm a big Bryson fan, and part of the big reason that I'm a big fan is the fact that here's a kid who pushed the envelope, and he got a lot of criticism for it. No matter what he was trying or how he behaved or what he was doing out there in his effort to try and, find a different way to do things better, people were giving him all sorts of grief about it. He had a nickname, that the media was using called Dr. Dork. The kid's a physics major, okay? Give him a break. Anybody who walks into college and decides that he's going to major in physics is a little different than the average golfer out there, okay? And so all he was doing was using his academic interest to see, is there a different way I can do things and maybe get better? With this, single length was one part of it. And now that you've seen after a U.S. Open win, going out and, working his tail off and gaining all sorts of mass and flexibility, to increase club head speed, out there. But now that he has the U.S. Open win, that has to validate it. And that has to shut the naysayers up, I think. Now, is this all of a sudden going to mean that a lot more people go single length? No, I don't think so, because golf is and forever will be a sport that's filled with, a strong dose of traditionalism, and single length flies in the face of that traditionalism. But the stigma has been knocked down to where now people don't just laugh and poo-poo it. They have a certain amount of respect for it, and at this point they say, nah, that's not for me. Or, I think I'm going to take a look at it. But I think where it's evolved, as I've watched it, is, and this is what I feel, there's no question that a player from tour player ability all the way to beginner could play a single length set if he chose. And he can learn, and he can play well with it, okay? But it's what do you want to play with. And when you look at all sorts of good players, low single-digit handicappers, scratch 2, 4, 6, I wouldn't try and go sell one of those guys on changing over to single length, because first of all, the reason they're, a single-digit player is because they've got skills. They've already got a swing that repeats itself reasonably well. They have pretty good distance control. They don't suffer from a high level of inconsistency with the irons. And so for them to convert over to single length, it's going to take some work, because they're going to have to get used to how far they hit each club. What are their distance gaps? Do they need to make any loft tweaks to get distance gaps they're comfortable with? They're probably going to have to change something in their set makeup, because most people who convert from a set of conventional incremental length irons over to a set of single length irons, in the single length set, you're probably going to have one fewer iron in your set makeup than you did before with the conventional set. And the alternative is going to be a hybrid somewhere. And trying to convince, a 2 or a scratch or a 4, to do that, it may not be worth the effort, because what are they going to gain? The big benefit of single length is to improve iron shot consistency. And who needs that more? It's the average player. So as it's evolved, I kind of see, okay, you got a golfer walks in the shop, and you say, how can I help you? Tell me a little bit about your game. And he happens to say in the conversation, and I'm not as consistent as I'd like to be with my irons. Boom. That's the thing that starts to light the light that says, would you consider trying to hit, some single-length test clubs? Because that's exactly what they're intended to be. When you have every iron, the same length, same everything for the specs, it's like you're swinging one club, but with 8 different lofts, or something like that. And so you're in one stance, one posture, one swing plane only. And therefore, the chance for improving swing consistency and shot consistency, that's where it's there. Okay, so you look at who needs an improvement in shot consistency of the irons, and that becomes the player that, can be, an ideal candidate for single length. Now, when it comes to woods, there's a whole thing there where you could have a guy still playing, with, conventional length irons, but he's struggled. He's not as consistent with the fairway woods. With this, he goes into single length fairway woods. He can gain consistency there, from it. So yeah, it's there, I think, to stay, but it's never going to get to the point where it has a greater market share than conventional incremental length irons, because that's such, so traditional in the game.
Yeah.
Out there.
But that's just fine, right? It really is just fine, because if you can get out there to the people, I've got a 30 handicap lady right now, and not the right length clubs, doesn't have consistency. I mean, it's a terrific match for somebody like that. Doesn't need a lot of clubs in the bag. Not 4, 5, 6, 6, 7, 8, 9 irons. 6, maybe 7, 9. 1 or two wedges and a couple of hybrids and a fairway. Perfect match.
Yeah. I would love for there to be enough demand out there, or enough marketing, that I could design, what we did with the 730 CL set, the 8-piece set for slow swingers, but to do a single length all hybrid iron set all the way down to the pitching wedge. I'm still toying with the idea. I do think it's possible to make a hollow body hybrid type sand wedge. I think that is possible. And I'll maybe goof around with something like that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Because as you well know, when your club head speed, is not much more than, let's say, 60 miles an hour with a driver, you don't need 14 clubs. It's a waste. And you don't need your irons to be 4 degrees apart in loft. 6 is fine, to get, 10 yards or so of distance gap between each one. And it's okay, because many of these slow swingers sweep the ball anyway, and that's a better swing for an all hybrid iron set anyway.
Well, you gave the perfect ending, because, as I said at the beginning, you're sort of retired. So, thinking about single-length hybrids throughout the set, who knows? Maybe it's something that will happen someday, too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Tom. That it was great to learn a lot more about, sort of the inside scoop about some of this. And the next set of clubs that I've got, I haven't built a set of clubs for myself in a couple of years, but it's going to be single length when I do it, and it's going to be fun to do that. Well, I'll put links in the show notes, both to Wishon Golf, where there's talk about the EQ1, also to Diamond International, where most of us, and I don't like to use the word custom so much, professional club fitters, because custom gets worn out. It's just a little bugaboo about me anymore. I'm a professional at what I do, and most of us who do this are. Thanks for the time today. Appreciate it.
Oh, are you kidding? Thanks for the attention to be able to, share some of this information with us. It's like I wrote in my Captain Clubmaker book. The biggest thing that I believe for anybody in their life is to know that what you're doing matters to somebody. That's the greatest reward you can have is, when somebody lets you know that something you're doing matters, and that's to me what it's all about. So thank you for making me feel like I matter.
And you still do.
The Golf Improvement Podcast is sponsored by Tony Wright and Game Improvement Golf. Tony creates exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
Well, Tom, it's always great to talk with you, and thanks for sharing the inside information about these new single-length designs. I, by the way, finished the fitting I talked about in the interview, and we ultimately found that the best hybrid length for this golfer was 38 inches rather than 37.5. And with an Aerotech HFS 780 hybrid shaft and the best total club MOI for him, he was hitting this combination beautifully. But what I'm going to do is actually build a 4 hybrid to exactly the same specs of length, MOI, and with the shaft I used as for the 5 hybrid we tested with. Pretty neat stuff. I put a link in the show notes to the Wishon Golf website where you can find out more information about these new single-length club designs. My shout-out today is a little different, but it's one that I have to do. My brother-in-law, Frank Ziegler, who lived in Stowe Township, Pennsylvania, passed away this Sunday morning. A total shock. He owned a small bar in Stowe Township for many years, Ace's Tavern. He was very active in community activities in the area, and he loved golf. He actually organized a golf tournament in the area for many, many years. I'm betting he's already made 1 or more hole-in-ones now that he's in heaven, and we miss you, Frank. Well, that's it for today. A few new podcast possibilities are again brewing, and you'll just have to wait for about 2 weeks to find out about the next one. In the meantime, take care, and please stay safe.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com